Hello everybody and welcome to Skrrt Garage. My name is Connor and today I'm going to do a buyer's guide, a ownership review, and some of the weak points or just generally things to look at when you are about to purchase a BMW M2. I have owned two BMW M2s. I have done all the supporting modifications that you can do to those cars, and I just generally want to tell you guys some of the high and low points about that car, things to look at before you go ahead and purchase one. And I get asked this question all the time, like, which model should I go for in the M2 lineup? So I'm also going to give you guys a little bit of breakdown of all the flavors that they come in and maybe some of the things that you should look for when considering to buy one of these cars. So with that, let's get this video started. All right guys, before I get on to the ownership review of my M2 and some of the things that you might want to look at, let me briefly talk about the production cycle and different options you can get with the M2s. They come in three flavors: the OG M2, the M2 Competition, and also the M2CS. I will briefly go over all of them and some of the changes that happen year by year to kind of let you guys know either things to look for if you're trying to buy a car or potentially which one you might want to stay away from. So let's get started. First, we have the OG M2 that had a single turbo N55 inline 6-cylinder engine. It was 3 liters, just like the other variations of the S55 that come in the later cars. Now, this car was offered with a 7-speed dual clutch transmission or a 6-speed manual transmission. This single turbo N55 engine came with 365 horsepower and 369 foot-pounds of torque. It's a torquey little engine. It revs to 7,000 RPM. It sounds fantastic as it gets to its 7,000 RPM red line. With the 2016 to 2018 cars, in 2016, when it was unveiled, like I said, it had both those two transmission options, the 6-speed and the 7-speed. It had the Dakota leather seats. It had exposed woven carbon fiber, and obviously all the M goodies that came straight off the M3 and M4, like their axles, their brakes, the M differential, all that good stuff is all on the OG M2. In 2017, moving on from 2016, BMW did unveil a M Performance edition of the BMW M2. Supposedly, there are 150 cars, all in Alpine white. These cars, the M Performance package that you could get, was essentially on the powertrain, same thing as the OG M2, same engine, same transmission, same everything. The difference was it came with the M Performance exhaust as standard with the titanium tips. It also came with the M Performance coilovers. As far as the interior goes, you're really not gaining much, but you're losing a lot. You're getting manually adjustable seats. You get a terrible sound system. It's what BMW calls the hi-fi system, instead of the beautiful Harman Kardon system that comes in the other M2s. One exterior difference with this car is that the mirror caps are black, and they're not the kind of faux M ones with like the point going back towards the car, but they're just black mirror caps on a white car. So that is the M Performance edition that came out only in 2017. Next, in 2018, BMW released the LCI. That is BMW speak for the mid-cycle refresh. That car came with new headlights, new taillights, new interior trim pieces, the newest version of the BMW iDrive with touchscreen, and a very nice looking instrument cluster that is analog, but it looks digital. That is the car that I actually purchased twice. I purchased one new in 2018, and then a few years later, I purchased a used 2018. Beyond that, the transmission, the powertrain, all that stuff stayed the exact same. Okay, the big change up is in 2019. BMW released the M2 Competition. Now this car, its actual origin is because of emissions. Now not a lot of people actually know that, but What was happening in Germany and really just Europe in general was the emissions laws were getting tighter and tighter and tighter. And it was gonna swing the hammer down on the BMW M2 N55 engine. And BMW crunched the numbers and found that in order to rework the N55 engine and to get it to pass the emissions that were now standardized and have enough power to compete with its competitors, it just wasn't gonna happen. So what did BMW do? They axed it. They killed the N55 engine from the BMW M2, and in its place, they gave us the S55 engine. That's correct, the full fat M3, M4, twin turbo S55 engine. And because they gave the M2 competition now, you know, the new M2, the S55 engine, they also decided to go ahead and give it a few other things like the real M seats, the M wing mirrors, and a few of the other cool little nannies that come with the full fat M treatment, like the M buttons that are on the steering wheel that you can pre-program to your individual settings. The M2 competition also got a new front fascia on the bumper, and that's really about it. The M2 competition, because of the seats, because of the mirrors, because of the engine, it sold like hotcakes. It's basically another mid-cycle refresh based purely on the need for BMW to put in a different engine due to emissions. Anyways, that is the BMW M2 competition. This engine came with a 405 horsepower and 406 foot-pounds of torque. It is a monster, especially if you tune the car. It can run with just about anything. Okay, the last car is the M2CS. That car came out in 2020, and it has the full BMW CS treatment. And the CS treatment on their cars is carbon fiber roof, carbon fiber hood, a unique front splitter, a unique rear spoiler, and obviously carbon fiber on the diffuser. It came with these gorgeous 763M gold or black wheels, and you can also get this with optional carbon ceramic brakes. From the factory, it came on Cup 2 tires, and when this car was unveiled, it was truly astonishing. It won Car of the Year from a few different publications, and I personally would love to own one of these. I've now owned two OG M2s, and I think the next M2 I get will be the M2CS. What else? The M2CS, any CS car doesn't have an armrest for whatever reason. They want your arm not on the armrest, they want your hands on the steering wheel. Anyways guys, that is pretty much a little overview. Oh, I forgot to tell you, the horsepower on the M2CS. Well, it's 444 horsepower and it is 406 foot-pounds of torque. Same torque as the other S55 engine, but a bit more horsepower to boot. Which one you go for depends on you. You might want the sound of the OG M2. That's kind of what really drew me to that car. You might want the M seats and the mirrors and stuff like that. So you might say, hey, I think the M2 competition is more my style. Totally get it. Definitely, it's a fantastic car. Or you might say, I want something a little bit more exclusive and the highest trim that you can get in the model. So I'm gonna get the M2CS. And I think that is a great strategy. Personally, for me, I think it's a budget thing. If my budget could allow a very nice M2 competition and I could freely move within that budget, you know, high or low, that's probably the car I would get. If my budget is more in the M2, OG M2 budget, then that's the car I would get because they're both amazing cars. Just let your budget kind of determine which one is for you. I think that the N55 sounds better, but the S55 is a lot more powerful and has a little bit better features. So that's for you guys to decide. And of course, if you can get the M2CS, if that's in your budget, then that's the car to have. I do believe it's gonna be very collectible. Anyways, let's move on to the ownership review portion. Like I said before, 2018 manual transmission M2. I drove it for about 8,000 miles, something like that, and my ownership costs are extremely low. It's a new car, they should be really low, and so I think when I bought the car, it had like 21,000 miles, something like that, and anytime I buy a car, not just the BMW, but anytime I buy a car, I always change the fluids. I always want to know what condition they're in so that when I drive the car and I'm experiencing it on track or autocross or wherever, I just want to make sure that everything is changed and everything is perfect. So When I got it, I changed the motor oil, the manual transmission fluid, and the differential fluid, and I actually made a video about it. You can check it out up here if you would like to. But that entire fluids change cost somewhere between $250 and $300. I can't quite remember, but I did it all myself. It was super easy. BMW makes servicing their cars very, very easy. The next thing that I replaced on this car, I didn't actually replace anything, but the M2 has a really long clutch pedal. The engagement is great, but just the travel of it is really long. So if you ever are at like, you know, a stoplight or something like that, you can press the pedal all the way in, and for me, it was almost like extending my leg all the way. And for that same reason, the clutch stop, I guess it's a modification you can do for like $15, but almost everybody who has these cars, at least on the forums, buys this clutch stop, and I did as well, and it really did help. It takes away like a few inches of travel, and so you can rest your leg a lot easier when you're clutching. So that was like 15 bucks. The next expense I had on this car, man, there really wasn't much. Because I took my car to the racetrack, I did replace the brake fluid with Castrol SRF. It's, by my opinion, you know, take it with a grain of salt, the best brake fluid you can buy if you are gonna seriously drive your car. And I think one bottle of that is like $60. I can't quite remember. And it's really easy, again, to bleed the brakes on these cars. Now, there was one other cost that I incurred, and if you're smart, you won't have this cost, but I was stupid and I did. So let me tell you about that to hopefully save you guys from the hassle. Okay, before I took my car to the track, I read online a ton of people said that the standard brakes and the standard brake pads are completely up to the challenge of a track day as long as you're not going full out. And it was my first time at this track, and so I figured, yeah, you know what, first time at this track, I'm not gonna be a hero. I'm certain my brakes can last for one track day if I don't go crazy. And I went to the track, and then as soon as I got on track, I just went full guerrilla mode. I probably wasn't even thinking. I just drove the car as hard as I could, as fast as I could, and I 100% cooked the brakes, like big time cooked the brakes. I got the brake pad so hot that the brake pad material, the metal that's on the brake pad, transferred onto the rotor. So I didn't hurt the rotor, but I just deposited all these metal particles onto my rotor surface. So as I'm driving home, I'm feeling all this like crunching on my rotor, and sure enough, I get home and you can see like all these kind of metal smears that are across the rotor. And I read online that if you buy true racing track pads, you can put those track pads in and just drive around normal for a few days. And because the track pads are so much more abrasive, they'll take that off. That didn't work. I put the track pads on, it squeaked like crazy everywhere I went, and it still wasn't strong enough to get this kind of fused or soldered almost metal off of the rotors on my car. So I talked to a friend of mine who owns a shop, and he offered to turn the rotors for me. Because the car only had like 26,000 miles or something like that, and we measured the rotors, they had tons of life on them. So he turned them and probably took like a good 1/2 millimeter off of them at least, to get all this kind of caked on metal off of the rotor. And normally, I don't think most people will turn cross and drilled rotors, but he did, and it turned out great. I put my OEM pads back in, problem solved. So, moral of the story for you guys, if you are gonna track your M2, get racing brake pads. You must do it. The car is so capable everywhere else around the track, and even on the brakes, that you get fooled or baited in a way into driving the car hard. You don't have to be a great driver. The car will make you look good. And because of that, it just feels natural going fast. So don't listen to people on the forums. You need racing brake pads if you take it to a track. Okay, soapbox over, let's move on. And we're gonna talk about a couple of the weak points to look at on the BMW M2 competition and as well on the OG M2. Okay, so if you're gonna buy an OG M2, we're already on the subject, look at the general stuff first. Look at wear and tear on the car, look at the paint, look at the tire tread depth, look at the brake pads, look at the rotors, and then look around the engine. Look to see if there's any coolant leaks. Look to see if the oil pan is leaking any oil out. Just general checks. That's all you really have to do. Then once you get in the car to test drive it, put it in gear and build boost. You know, punch it a little bit in gear to see that your boost is building up correctly, because one kind of weak point on the N55 is the charge pipe. The charge pipe that takes all this pressurized air is known to fail. And when it does, because it's plastic, it'll just bust off and you'll have a tough time holding the same amount of pressure boost that you normally would. So check the charge pipe. I can kind of show you guys where the location is if you want, but really the easiest way to tell if you can't just see it with your naked eye is to build boost in a gear and you'll know right then and there. The next thing I'll have you look at with the OG M2 is put the car in gear and turn a really tight circle. Make sure that the differential is fine. It's not humming, it's not kind of pulsating as you're increasing in speed. And the last thing I'll have you look at, I'm gonna say this last, and I'm also gonna say it with a grain of salt because I've only heard of one, maybe two people having this. And it's people who have their cars seriously tuned and they're taking them and they're road racing or something like that. I have heard, you know, on the forums that one owner did this, had it fully, you know, stage 2, E30, all that kind of stuff. And he took it road racing, and when he went to do oil change, he found metal shavings in his oil. Now that is not good. You guys already know that if you're watching this video, but if it was me and I was gonna go buy a car, I would definitely take the oil filter cap off and just look at the oil. It's very evident to see if there's metal flakes inside of the oil. If there's no metal flakes, you're good to go, turn it back on and don't think about it. I've heard of almost every owner that I'm friends with has probably taken their car to at least an autocross or a track day, and the N55 M2 is almost bulletproof. So take that with a grain of salt. He was really pushing the car hard as far as tuning goes and on the track. So I'm not gonna say it's a general thing, but if it was me, again, I would check it. When I'm there looking at the coolant, I would also go ahead and look at the oil and the oil filter. Okay, let's talk about the S55 BMW M2. So if I was gonna drive an S55 M2, I would do the exact same stuff. I would build boost, but this time, you know, you're building boost and you're looking, because the car will tell you if it has, first off, a check engine light or a engine malfunction. The car will just pop up immediately and let you know. So when you're driving a used M2 competition, floor it. I know it sounds ridiculous, but floor it, and if anything pops up like a warning, it could be a drivetrain malfunction, indicative of timing gone bad because of the infamous crank hub, or it could be other things. So, I mean, the S55, again, it's super bulletproof. Both these cars, the M55 and S55 engines, very bulletproof cars, but you want to look at the crank hub and any engine malfunctions with the S55 M2. Another thing I would look at with the S55 engine is the coolant reservoirs. There's two. There's an auxiliary and then the main one. The auxiliary is known to leak. Same with the internals of the intercooler on top of the engine. Sometimes when the intercooler leaks, it'll leak that coolant down into the charge pipe of the S55 M2. So easy way to check is look at the auxiliary and the normal coolant. If it's super low, and just look. If it looks like there's been coolant in there, you know that at least the intercooler is damaged and you need a new intercooler, which could cost a serious amount of money. So with that, guys, I'm pretty sure I have mentioned everything I want to. I didn't want to make this video too long. Hopefully you guys have learned a thing or two about the ownership experience of a M2, whether it be a OG M2 or the M2 competition, or if you're lucky enough to get an M2CS. With that, guys, if you have liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, let me know any other comments down below that you have to prospective M2 owners to help them out. So with that, guys, thank you, and we will see you on the next video. Peace.